The crystal champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, scattering fragments that glittered like fallen stars. But no one moved to clean them because every eye in the Whitmore mansion was locked on the scene unfolding, watching a marriage collapse in real time. Isabella Whitmore stood at the center of her own birthday celebration, 26 candles flickering on a cake no one dared to touch, wearing a deep crimson dress, the same one her husband had given her on their last anniversary, when his lies still came wrapped in velvet boxes and polished promises. Her beauty was undeniable even in this moment of humiliation, her pale skin glowing beneath the chandeliers, her golden hair styled into soft waves, her striking features refined and perfect, her clear blue eyes calm and unreadable as Adrian Whitmore entered carrying a baby that was not hers. The infant, swaddled in pink cashmere, gurgled in his arms while Adrian, with his angular looks and steel-gray eyes, looked every bit the polished pharmaceutical heir who believed he controlled the narrative. At 32, he was considered powerful, handsome, and ambitious, and walking behind him was Sophie, entering with the arrogance of conquest, her platinum hair flowing over a gown Isabella recognized as her own. "Happy birthday, darling," Adrian said with cruel triumph, his voice carrying the confidence of a man convinced he had already won. The room fell silent. Isabella's parents sat frozen at the head table, her mother's hand trembling against her pearls. Adrian's mother, Margaret, clutched her phone, ready to call lawyers and reporters. Guests, business partners, and photographers who had been invited to celebrate were now witnessing devastation. Adrian pulled papers from his jacket with theatrical precision, divorce documents already signed by him. He lifted the baby for all to see. "Sophie and I are in love, and this is our daughter. I thought it was time we stopped pretending. What better moment than surrounded by everyone who matters?" The silence was suffocating until Adrian's younger brother Damien began to clap, slowly, deliberately, and others followed, business partners, even the lawyer who had drafted their prenup. The applause spread like thunder before a storm, but Isabella's reaction stunned them all. A small smile formed at the corner of her lips, growing into something cold that lowered the temperature of the entire room. A server appeared with a fresh glass of champagne, which she accepted gracefully. She sipped and said calmly, "Fascinating. Adrian, you've always enjoyed theatrics, but you forgot the most important rule of performance. The best plot twists are the ones no one sees coming." Her heels clicked against the marble as she walked toward him, the crowd parting instinctively. Her best friend Claire filmed quietly from the corner, ensuring evidence was preserved. Isabella stopped close, enough to breathe in the cologne she had once gifted him, and drew a manila envelope from her clutch. She held it high. "Before you finish your little performance, perhaps you'd like to explain these medical records to our audience. Official documents from Riverdale Fertility Clinic dated 18 months ago, when you insisted we try for a baby. The tests were thorough. 3 separate examinations over 6 weeks, they confirmed complete sterility. You've been unable to father a child since that polo accident in college, the one you dismissed as minor." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sophie's flawless face drained of color, her carefully applied makeup stark against her pale skin. Isabella's voice cut sharper. "Which means this baby is not his. So the only question is, whose child are you parading tonight?" Margaret's phone slipped from her hand. Damien froze mid-applause. Photographers, sensing blood, raised their cameras. "And there's more," Isabella continued. She returned to her table and lifted her grandmother's leather journal, filled with meticulous notes. "I've known about your affairs for 2 years, Adrian, 17 of them. Would you like me to list them? Miami with your secretary, Tokyo with the wine merchant's daughter, weekends with the judge's wife. I have everything. Receipts, hotel bookings, credit card charges. Even the abortion you paid for with Mistress number 8, all taken from our joint account. Every violation of the fidelity clause in our prenup, carefully documented." Roof. Baby began to cry as Adrian's hands shook. Isabella's voice grew stronger. "You thought you married a fool, a beautiful ornament to parade at conferences, someone to make you respectable. But you never bothered to know me. You never asked about my grandmother, who built an empire from nothing and taught me that roses grow thorns for a reason. She picked up the divorce papers he had flaunted. Your lawyer drafted these well, but missed one crucial clause. The penalty for infidelity is the forfeiture of all marital assets. All of them. The room erupted. In shock, Margaret lunged for the papers, but Isabella stepped back, composed and untouchable. Adrian opened his mouth, but no words came. Isabella turned to the guests, her icy calm unbroken. Thank you all for attending tonight. I'm sure the photographs will fetch a fortune. The headline is already written. Pharmaceutical heir's birthday surprise backfires spectacularly. She walked to the untouched cake, blew out all 26 candles in one breath and whispered, "My wish already came true. You showed everyone who you really are, Adrian. A man foolish enough to destroy his own life in front of 63 witnesses," Sophie shrieked. "You're lying. The baby is his. Tell them, Adrian." But Adrian's silence betrayed him, and every guest now stared at Damien, whose pale face confirmed the truth. The baby's features mirrored his own, from the shape of her chin to the amber flecks in her eyes. Isabella gathered her journal and clutch. Claire met her eyes and said, "Got everything." Isabella's mother stood proudly, tears falling. "That's my daughter. That's my brilliant, fearless daughter." Genuine applause filled the room, reverent and awed. Adrian's humiliation had become his execution, and Isabella hadn't even raised her voice. At the door, she paused one final time. "Adrian, happy birthday to me. And just so you're clear, this is only the beginning. You wanted war, and you've declared it against someone prepared for it. Oh, and you might check your email. The board will have interesting questions about those contaminated vaccines you shipped overseas." She walked out, leaving Adrian frozen in place, holding another man's baby as his empire began to collapse. Dawn broke over London like liquid gold spilling across the horizon. But Adrian, Whitmore, hadn't closed his eyes all night. He sat in the Ritz-Carlton penthouse suite, drowning in whiskey, staring at the shattered remains of his life through the glow of his phone screen. The missed calls told their own story. 27 from his mother Margaret, 43 from furious board members, 18 from lawyers and 1 from Sophie, followed by a desperate text insisting the baby was his. But the math never lied, and neither did the calendar. He had checked 16 times. He was in Tokyo negotiating a deal when the child was conceived. That night, what once felt like victory now tasted like poison. Headlines multiplied like a plague. Pharmaceutical heir humiliated with paternity bombshell. Sterile executive exposed at wife's birthday party. Isabella Whitmore destroys dynasty with evidence. Worst of all, the London Times printed a front-page story linking Whitmore Pharmaceuticals to an FDA investigation into contaminated vaccines shipped to Nigeria. The world Adrian had ruled was crumbling faster than he could drink. His phone rang, again. Against his better judgment, he answered. "You absolute fool." His mother's voice could have frozen fire. "Do you understand what you've done? Your father is sick with stress, the board has called an emergency meeting, and that ridiculous mistress of yours has camped outside the estate claiming she belongs to this family. And now the press is circling like vultures." Adrian tried to defend himself. "Mother, I can explain." But Margaret cut him off. "Explain? Explain how you didn't even know you were sterile? Explain how you humiliated the only woman who gave you legitimacy in the medical community? Do you understand 40% of our revenue came from contracts Isabella secured? You've destroyed everything." The line went dead, and Adrian hurled his phone against the wall, watching it shatter the way his marriage had the night before. Across the city, Isabella was untouched by chaos. She sat in her private penthouse, a residence Adrian never knew she owned, sipping Ethiopian coffee from fine china at a marble dining table. She had bought the apartment 6 months earlier through a trust, knowing this day would come. Claire, her lifelong friend and brilliant forensic accountant, entered with her laptop and a box of pastries, her smile tired but victorious. 3 publishers called this morning. They want you to write a book about last night, and the FDA has already confirmed they're accelerating their investigation into Whitmore Pharmaceuticals. Your evidence gave them exactly what they needed. Isabella set down her cup, her silk robe flowing around her like armor. Tell the publishers I'm considering my options. What about the other matter? Claire's eyes gleamed. We've been digging through every account. He's been transferring assets offshore, hiding paintings, even moving property into holding companies. He thought he was clever. But Isabella, we caught every single transfer. We have him cornered. A message buzzed on Isabella's phone. It was from Dr. Julian Carter, her mentor, a man who had guided her through her PhD years ago. Your grandmother would be proud. The Foundation Board is ready to announce the Beatrice Medical Scholarship for young women next week. Isabella smiled softly, her heart warming at the thought of honoring her grandmother's legacy. Another message arrived, this one from Nora, Adrian's secretary. He doesn't know I've been feeding you information for 8 months. Do you want me to go to work tomorrow? Isabella typed back instantly. Yes. Document everything. He'll spiral. Desperate men always make mistakes. By noon, Adrian attempted his first apology, not to Isabella directly, but through his lawyer, Gregory Ellis, who appeared at her penthouse door looking like he wished he were anywhere else. Isabella received him in her office, a commanding space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She wore a tailored cream suit, her presence sharp as steel. Mrs. Whitmore, he began hesitantly. Miss Sterling, she corrected coldly. I took my husband's name as a courtesy. That courtesy has expired. Gregory cleared his throat and adjusted his Italian leather chair, already feeling small under her gaze. My client wishes to discuss an amicable resolution. Isabella laughed softly, the sound like glass chiming in the wind. Amicable? Your client attempted to humiliate me in front of my family and 63 witnesses with photographers present. He admits his approach was ill-considered. Isabella's eyes burned with calm fire. Ill-considered? Let me explain something about amicable, Mr. Ellis. Amicable would have been a private conversation. Amicable would have been mediation. What your client declared was war. And I, unlike him, am fully prepared for war. She slid a folder across the desk. Here you'll find a detailed record of every asset Adrian attempted to hide in the last 6 months. Offshore accounts, property transfers, even attempts to bury his grandfather's art collection in a Swiss vault. All of it. I want it back, with interest. Full compliance with the prenuptial agreement's fidelity clause. And his resignation from the Whitmore Pharmaceuticals Board within 72 hours. Gregory paled as he skimmed the documents. How did you get this information? Isabella's smile was subtle, dangerous. Because your client's greatest weakness is assuming women like me are ornamental. He confided every detail to Sophie, never knowing she sleep talks. And that love nest they shared? I bought that apartment 6 months ago through a shell company. I'm his landlord, Mr. Ellis. Every word they've spoken in that flat was captured on a baby monitor feeding straight to my phone. He wasn't clever. He was careless. The lawyer's hands trembled as he set down the papers. What do you want? Isabella leaned forward, her voice slicing through the air. Everything he tried to steal returned with interest. And then some. He can surrender, or he can face a jury. Gregory swallowed hard and rose, defeated before the battle had even begun. By evening, Adrian tried a different tactic. He appeared at the Sterling family estate, where Isabella's parents lived in the house her grandmother had bought decades ago, when families like theirs had to fight for the right to own property in prestigious neighborhoods. Malcolm Sterling, a retired military colonel, opened the door. His 6'4" frame filled the doorway like a fortress. His voice was low but unshakable. You need to leave, Adrian. Adrian's tone was pleading. Please, sir, I need to speak with Isabella. Malcolm's eyes were stone. You had your chance, you're a mistake, and she's correcting it. Isabella's mother, Vivian, appeared beside him, her elegance glowing even in casual clothes. Her voice was sharp as a blade. And if you ever step foot on this property again, I will personally ensure every friend, every associate, every contact you've ever had knows exactly what you did to my daughter. Consider this your final warning." The door slammed in his face, leaving him standing in the cold. Through the window, he glimpsed Isabella seated at the piano, her hands gliding across the keys, playing Chopin's Nocturne with effortless grace, her expression serene as though his destruction were nothing more than background noise. That night, Adrian discovered the final blow. He attempted to access their accounts only to find everything frozen under investigation. The personal accounts he still held contained exactly £1 each. In the transaction history, a note appeared in Isabella's signature style. "I left. You what you left me. Nothing worth keeping." The law offices of Whitmore, Bennett and Associates had always been Adrian's stronghold, a fortress of polished wood and old money, where he believed no storm could touch him. But now those walls felt like the setting of a war tribunal, and Adrian knew he was not the judge. He was the accused. Isabella sat at the head of the conference table surrounded by bankers' boxes, each filled with documents, her marriage, laid bare like a financial autopsy. Claire tapped efficiently at her laptop, cross-checking records while Adrian's new legal counsel, Vincent Ramsey, tried to compose himself. Ramsey was notorious for defending the guilty. He had once gotten a senator's son acquitted of insider trading, and Adrian pinned his last hope on him. "Mrs. Whitmore," Ramsey began, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of a man who thought charm could still work. Isabella didn't look up. "Miss Sterling," she corrected sharply. That name expired with his dignity. Ramsey cleared his throat. "Miss Sterling, my client acknowledges mistakes were made, but surely we can avoid turning this into an unnecessary spectacle." Isabella's gaze lifted, her icy eyes cutting straight through him. "Unnecessary spectacle? Your client orchestrated a public ambush at my birthday party with his mistress and her child, with photographers hired to document what he thought would be my downfall. That is the definition of spectacle. This," she gestured to the stacks, "of evidence is simply truth." Ramsey tried another tactic. "He is prepared to negotiate financial settlements." Isabella leaned forward, her voice as precise as a scalpel. "He forfeited that right the moment he violated the fidelity clause of our prenup 17 times. There will be no negotiation. There will be accountability." She slid another folder across the table. "This is a timeline of every transfer Adrian has attempted in the last 6 months. Money siphoned into offshore accounts, properties moved to shell companies, art collections hidden abroad. I have every detail documented." Ramsey flipped through the pages, his face paling with each revelation. How did you obtain this information?" Isabella's smile was cold. "Because your client is arrogant enough to underestimate women." He bragged about these transfers in bed to Sophie, never realizing she talked in her sleep. "And that apartment he used to play house with her? I own it. Every whisper in that space has been recorded. He wasn't clever, he was sloppy." Ramsey set the folder down with shaking hands. "What exactly do you want?" Isabella's answer was immediate. Everything he tried to hide returned, with interest. Full compliance with the prenup. His resignation from the Whitmore Pharmaceuticals board within 72 hours. And his public silence. Ramsey's voice trembled. "He'll never agree to this. The company is his inheritance." Isabella's eyes hardened. "The company is built on blood. He shipped contaminated vaccines that killed children overseas. I have the memos proving he knew. So he can resign, or he can explain to a federal jury why quarterly profits mattered more than lives. Either way, Adrian is finished." That evening, Adrian tried again, but this time he went to the one place he believed he could still manipulate: Isabella's family estate. The grand house stood as a monument to resilience, purchased decades ago by her grandmother Beatrice when women like her were told they couldn't own such property. Adrian stood at the door, his pride buried under desperation, when it opened, to reveal Malcolm Sterling, Isabella's father, his tall frame blocking the doorway like a stone wall. The retired colonel's voice carried the quiet authority of a man who had commanded soldiers. "You need to leave." "Please," Adrian said, his tone breaking. I need to speak with Isabella. She's still my wife. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. You're not her husband. You're a mistake she's correcting. Before Adrian could protest, Vivian Sterling appeared beside her husband, her presence elegant and sharp. And if you step foot here again, she said, her voice like sharpened glass, I'll make certain every church, every community, every circle we belong to knows exactly what you did to our daughter. Your name will be ashes. Adrian's mouth opened, but the door closed with finality, shutting him out of the last sanctuary he thought he had. Through the window, he saw her. Isabella sat at the grand piano, her fingers gliding over the keys of a Chopin nocturne, her expression serene, unbothered, untouchable. It was as if orchestrating his destruction had been no more disruptive to her life than playing a melody. He stood there in the cold night air, realizing he had lost not just his wife, but her family, her legacy, and her protection. Later that night, in the sterile silence of his hotel suite, Adrian attempted to log into their accounts. What he found left him colder than the winter air outside. Every joint account was frozen, pending investigation. His personal accounts each contained exactly £1. A single message appeared in the transaction history, typed in Isabella's distinctive style. I left you what you left me, nothing worth keeping. The law firm's top-floor conference room was transformed into a battlefield. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the polished mahogany table where Isabella sat like a general commanding an army. Around her were bankers, boxes filled with documents, each one a weapon she had meticulously prepared, evidence of Adrian's affairs, financial transfers, and corporate crimes. Claire sat at her side, sharp-eyed and efficient, her laptop glowing with the digital map of Adrian's downfall. Across from them sat Adrian with his new counsel, Vincent Ramsey. The man had a reputation for spinning lies into acquittals, but even his confidence faltered as he faced Isabella. She wore a white suit that caught the light like armor, her presence calm, unwavering. Ramsey opened the meeting with his practiced charm. Miss Sterling, he began, carefully avoiding the name Whitmore, we can resolve this in a way that preserves dignity on both sides. Isabella's laugh was soft, but its echo carried steel. Dignity? My husband paraded his mistress and her child into my birthday party, hired photographers to capture my humiliation, and presented divorce papers in front of 63 witnesses. Dignity is long gone. What remains is consequence. Ramsey shifted uncomfortably. He admits his approach was unwise, but we must consider what a protracted legal battle will cost all parties. Isabella leaned forward, her voice quiet but cutting. Cost? Your client cost lives. Do you want me to read aloud the internal memos from Whitmore Pharmaceuticals, approving the shipment of contaminated vaccines overseas? Do you want me to share the list of 83 children who died because Adrian valued profit margins more than humanity? Don't talk to me about cost, talk to me about accountability. She slid another folder across the table. Here is the complete record of Adrian's attempts to hide assets, transfers to offshore accounts, shell companies, property deed shifts, even art collections smuggled into Swiss vaults. Every move has been documented. Ramsey flipped through the pages, his confidence dissolving as he realized she had anticipated everything. His hands trembled slightly. This is damning. Isabella's eyes narrowed. It's the truth. And you know as well as I do, truth is fatal in a courtroom when it's backed by proof. Adrian finally broke his silence, his voice strained, desperate. Isabella, please. We loved each other once. Can't we find some way through this? She looked at him, and for the first time her tone softened, though not with affection, only cold clarity. I loved the man I thought you were, Adrian. The man who spoke about medical ethics, who pretended to care about children dying from preventable diseases, who once cried watching a documentary with me. But that man never existed. You killed him the moment you chose greed over humanity. She turned back to Ramsey. Here are my terms. Full compliance with the prenuptial agreement. Every asset Adrian tried to conceal returned with interest. immediate resignation from the Whitmore Pharmaceuticals board, and silence. No statements, no interviews, no pity-seeking theatrics. You will leave the empire you corrupted, and I will rebuild it into something worthy. Ramsey tried to protest. The company is his inheritance. He'll never give that up. Isabella's reply was razor-sharp. The company is built on graves. If he doesn't resign, I will see him dragged through a federal trial for fraud, negligence, and corporate manslaughter. I have the evidence, and when I present it, no jury will ever see him as anything but a criminal who wore a tailored suit. The room fell silent. Adrian's shoulders slumped, his arrogance crumbling under the weight of her words. For the first time, he looked less like a powerful executive and more like a man already ruined. Ramsey closed the folder slowly, knowing the war was lost before it began. Outside the glass walls of the conference room, reporters clustered in the lobby, waiting to see who would emerge victorious. They wouldn't have to wait long. Isabella rose gracefully, gathering her grandmother's journal and her notes, her movements deliberate, assured. "Gentlemen," she said, "this meeting is over. You have 72 hours. Choose wisely." When she walked out, cameras flashed, capturing her calm smile while Adrian remained trapped inside, staring at the wreckage of everything he had built on lies. The war had officially begun, but Isabella had already won the first battle. 3 weeks after the infamous birthday party, Isabella Sterling walked into another war zone, the Whitmore Pharmaceuticals boardroom. The walls were lined with portraits of dead patriarchs who had built their fortune on greed, and for the first time, Isabella was no longer the ornament in the room. She was the storm. Bankers' boxes filled with files surrounded her like ammunition, each one a year of her marriage dissected and catalogued. Claire tapped away on her laptop, monitoring the financial forensics that had stripped Adrian's empire bare. Vincent Ramsey had been replaced. Adrian had grown desperate and hired the most ruthless defense lawyer he could find, but even Ramsey's swagger couldn't mask the truth. Isabella had the upper hand. He tried his usual tactics. "They'll say you married for money. They'll paint you as a gold digger." Isabella barely looked up from the documents in front of her. "That narrative works if I had less wealth than him before the marriage. Unfortunately for your client, I was worth more before he even said I do." The truth hung in the air like perfume. But even as Adrian's lawyers scrambled, another name had begun to surface, whispered in corridors of power: Gabriel Stone. A man with wealth, influence, and an aura of mystery. Isabella had seen him from a distance at pharmaceutical conferences, always present, always watching, never approaching. Until now. Claire entered the room with a subtle smile. "Gabriel Stone is here. He asked to see you privately." Isabella smoothed the cream-colored suit she had chosen deliberately, soft elegance disguising sharpened steel. "Send him in." The door opened, and Gabriel stepped inside like he owned the air itself. 35 years old, tall, sculpted like marble. His presence carried the quiet intensity of a man used to getting what he wanted. His dark eyes held a depth that spoke of secrets and grief, and his voice, touched with a smooth British accent, rolled across the room like velvet. "Miss Sterling," he said, bowing his head slightly in greeting. Isabella gestured to the seat, across from her. "Mr. Stone, I assume you didn't come here to discuss the weather." Gabriel sat, his movements controlled and deliberate. "No, I came to discuss the future, specifically the future of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals, soon to be yours." Isabella's gaze sharpened. "That's presumptuous." He slid a tablet across the table. On it were documents showing share transfers, signatures, and inside knowledge no outsider should have possessed. Adrian's father signed his shares over to his wife Margaret years ago for tax purposes. Margaret despises scandal more than she loves her son, and she is prepared to sell. Combined with what you will receive in the divorce, you will hold controlling interest, and I can help you use it. Isabella's expression was unreadable, but her mind raced. "And why?" she asked carefully. "Would a venture capitalist with no official stake in this company be so invested in its destruction?" Gabriel leaned forward, his voice lowering. Because Whitmore Pharmaceuticals killed my sister. The room went still. Isabella studied him intently, her instincts prickling. Explain. His jaw tightened. 3 years ago, my sister Naya, 9 years old, died after being injected with contaminated insulin manufactured by this company. They knew it was defective. They shipped it anyway. And because recall costs would hurt their quarterly earnings, children like my sister died. His eyes darkened, burning with grief and fury. I want justice. I want them destroyed. But destroyed, legally, so that no child ever suffers again. You want revenge for personal betrayal. I want justice for murder. Our goals align. Before Isabella could respond, her phone rang. It was Nora, Adrian's secretary, whispering urgently. He's here at the office. He's shredding documents, deleting files. Security won't stop him because his name's still on the building. What do I do? Isabella stood instantly, her movements fluid as ice water. Call the FBI. Tell them evidence is being destroyed in an active federal investigation. She turned to Gabriel. You're coming with me. They moved through London's financial district like predators. Isabella's heels striking marble. Gabriel making phone calls in languages she didn't recognize. By the time they reached Whitmore Pharmaceuticals headquarters, the FBI was already swarming the building. Adrian stood in his office, the air filled with shredded paper like confetti from a ruined celebration. His face was pale, his suit wrinkled, his eyes wild. When he saw Isabella, rage poured out of him. You, he snarled. You did this. You destroyed everything. Isabella's reply was calm, lethal. No, Adrian. You destroyed yourself. I just documented it. FBI agents entered with handcuffs. Agent Sophia Morales, cool and composed, read the charges aloud. Adrian Whitmore, you are under arrest for destruction of evidence in a federal investigation. Adrian struggled as they bound him. This is my company, he shouted. Gabriel stepped forward, his presence like a blade. Your company was built on graves. My sister's among them. Adrian froze, recognition dawning in his eyes. You're the one buying our stock, orchestrating this? Gabriel's voice was low, precise. Not hostile. Invited. Your mother sold me her shares an hour ago. Your father is too ill to oppose it. And your brother Damien is hiding abroad with your mistress and the baby, spending the last of your offshore funds. You've already lost, Adrian. You just don't know how complete it is yet. The fight drained from Adrian as he sagged against the agents. In one last desperate attempt, he turned to Isabella, his voice breaking. Please. Isabella, we loved each other once. She stepped close enough for him to smell the perfume she had worn on their wedding day, now carrying nothing but poisoned memory. No, Adrian. I loved you. You loved the idea of me, someone to make you look credible, respectable, untouchable. But you never saw me. Not really. You saw decoration where there was strategy, beauty where there was strength. And that blindness is why you've lost. She pulled a recorder from her clutch and pressed play. Adrian's own voice filled the office. The Nigerians won't know the vaccines are contaminated. They barely have hospitals, much less testing facilities. Ship them anyway. The agents stiffened as the recording confirmed everything. Adrian's face collapsed in horror as the final nail was driven into his coffin. As the FBI led him away, his mother, Margaret, entered. Her composure shattered. She looked between her son in handcuffs and Isabella standing tall beside Gabriel. For the first time, she chose honesty. The papers are signed, she said to Gabriel. Then to Isabella, she whispered, I'm sorry. I raised a monster and told myself he was only ambitious. I was wrong. Isabella's reply was calm, merciless. Your apology doesn't resurrect the dead, but your cooperation may prevent future deaths. That evening, in the same boardroom where she had once been dismissed as ornamental, Isabella stood as majority owner of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals. The old board members sat silent, watching a woman they had underestimated transform their empire. Her voice carried steady and clear. You have two choices. Resign with what dignity you can salvage, or stay and help me rebuild this company into something that heals instead of kills. But understand this. Every contract will be reviewed, every pill tested twice, every decision scrutinized. We will lose money before we make it. Stock will plummet before it rises. But we will save lives. And that is the only legacy that matters. 7 resigned on the spot. 3 stayed, including Dr. Eleanor Park, the only woman on the board, who rose slowly and applauded. I've been waiting 20 years to hear someone say that in this room. Where do we start? Isabella's answer was simple, firm. Nigeria. We replace every contaminated vaccine with safe ones at our cost. Then we establish a fund for the families, and after that we open every file this company ever buried. For the first time in its history, Whitmore Pharmaceuticals had a leader who didn't fear the truth. While Adrian was locked away, Sophie's world began to crumble. She had imagined herself standing triumphant beside a powerful man wearing diamonds and silks, flaunting her newborn as the future heir to the Whitmore empire. Instead, she found herself in a dim apartment on the outskirts of Paris, Damien Whitmore beside her, burning through offshore accounts like a gambler at his last table. The champagne tasted flat, the silk sheets felt cheap, and Sophie could no longer escape the gnawing truth. She had traded security for a fantasy that was disintegrating before her eyes. Damien wasn't Adrian. He was reckless, impatient, already restless with her presence. He had begun entertaining other women even while Sophie nursed her child. One evening she confronted him, her voice trembling with rage. You promised me stability. You promised. My baby would be safe, Damien sneered, swirling his whiskey. That baby isn't mine, Sophie. You think I don't know? You think I didn't pay for a test? You were never loyal, you were just convenient. Her face drained of color. She stammered. Then why? Why bring me here? He leaned forward, his expression cruel. Because you were leverage against my brother. Now that he's finished, you're just baggage. Consider yourself lucky I gave you a roof. He stood, walking out with his phone pressed to his ear, leaving Sophie alone with her crying infant and the echo of her shattered dreams. Back in London, Isabella received a message from an unexpected source, an anonymous whistleblower within the Paris banking system. The files detailed Damien's accounts, transfers to Sophie, and evidence that he was laundering money through shell companies. Isabella slid the information across the table to Gabriel. He scanned it, his lips tightening. Your sister-in-law is about to learn what happens when a mistress is no longer useful. Damien's empire is smoke and Sophie is holding the last ember. She'll be left with nothing. Claire looked up from her screen. Do we intervene? Isabella's expression was icy calm. No, not yet. Sophie wanted to replace me. She played her part in humiliating me. Let her taste the cost of betrayal. But we will protect the child. That child is innocent. News broke within days. Paris police raided Damien's penthouse, seizing computers, jewelry, and cash. Sophie was dragged into the spotlight, accused of aiding fraud. Cameras captured her disheveled state as she shielded her baby from the flashing bulbs. For the first time, the woman who had once strutted across Isabella's birthday party in designer heels appeared small, broken, and terrified. Isabella watched the footage in her office, Gabriel standing beside her. He studied Isabella's face. Do you pity her? Isabella shook her head. No. I pity the child. Sophie chose greed over integrity. Choices have consequences. But I will not let an infant suffer for his mother's sins. Later that week, Isabella made a quiet trip to Paris. She didn't announce it, she didn't call reporters. She simply appeared at the Juvenile Protection Office, a discreet figure in a black coat, offering financial support for the child's care should Sophie be convicted. Sophie saw her there through the glass, her eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, she seemed ready to scream, but no sound came. Isabella simply looked at her, calm, unyielding, and then turned away. Sophie collapsed into tears, realizing too late that the woman she had scorned was the only one capable of mercy. Back In London, Damien faced his own downfall. Evidence of money laundering tied directly to offshore accounts in the Caribbean. Gabriel orchestrated quiet cooperation with Interpol, ensuring Damien's arrest would be as public as Adrian's. The Whitmore brothers, once untouchable princes of industry, were now disgraced men waiting for trial. At the heart of it all, Isabella grew stronger. The press, who once painted her as the humiliated wife, now hailed her as a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and power. Headlines shifted from gossip to reverence. Sterling turns, betrayal into revolution. Women across Europe wrote to her, thanking her for proving that dignity could outlast humiliation. Investors began reconsidering their withdrawal, whispering that perhaps this company could be reborn under her leadership. But Isabella knew the war was far from over. She stood at the window of her penthouse, overlooking the Thames, Gabriel beside her. He asked quietly, "What happens next?" Her answer was steady, sharp as steel. "Next, we deal with the family legacy. The Whitmores buried more than fraud. There are secrets older than Adrian's schemes, and I intend to uncover them all." The storm was not finished. It was only gathering strength. The funeral of Adrian's father, Richard Whitmore, drew the city's most powerful figures. CEOs, politicians, and aristocrats filled the cathedral, their faces somber but their whispers restless. Everyone knew the empire was collapsing, and everyone wanted to see who would claim the ashes. Isabella arrived dressed in black, a veil, covering her face, Claire at her side and Gabriel a few steps behind. She wasn't there to mourn a man who had ignored her existence during her marriage. She was there to witness the final transfer of power. Margaret Whitmore stood at the altar, her grief real but overshadowed by fear. With both her sons disgraced, Adrian in prison, and Damien hunted by Interpol, she had lost control of everything. When the priest concluded the eulogy, a solicitor stepped forward holding Richard's will. The congregation leaned in, anticipating scandal. The solicitor read with steady precision, "To my wife Margaret, I leave the London estate and its assets. To my sons Adrian and Damien I leave nothing. Their inheritance has already been squandered in their actions. To my granddaughter-in-law, Isabella Sterling Whitmore, I leave control of the Beatrice Foundation and full access to the Sterling Whitmore vault." Gasps filled the cathedral. Margaret swayed, her lips parting in disbelief. "What? That can't be right." The solicitor nodded. "It is Richard's wish," he said, and I quote, "Isabella is the only Whitmore with the intelligence and integrity to rebuild what we destroyed." After the funeral, Isabella, Claire, and Gabriel followed the solicitor to a discreet estate outside the city, a forgotten manor that had belonged to Richard's mother, Beatrice. The vault was hidden beneath the house, sealed by biometric locks. When Isabella placed her palm on the scanner, the door hissed open. What lay inside wasn't gold or jewels, but something far more valuable. Shelves upon shelves of leather-bound journals, glass vials, faded blueprints, and a laboratory frozen in time. Beatrice Whitmore had been more than a wealthy matriarch. She had been a scientist, decades ahead of her era, pioneering formulas for affordable insulin, vaccines, and antibiotics. Her discoveries had the potential to save millions, but the files also revealed the truth. Richard had buried her work, selling only the most profitable treatments and hiding formulas that could have changed the world. Isabella walked slowly through the vault, running her hand across the journals. "This is it. This is the legacy my grandmother-in-law intended. They suppressed it to protect profit margins. Generations of greed silenced her." She turned to Claire and Gabriel, her voice steady but fierce. "No more. We're going to bring this to light." Claire's eyes widened as she flipped through the journals. "If even half of this is viable, it could change medicine forever. But Isabella, releasing this will destroy the current market. The board, the shareholders, they'll revolt." Isabella's reply was resolute. "Then let them. This company has been an instrument of corruption for too long. If I lose everything to honor Beatrice's legacy, so be it. But I will not continue their cycle of greed. Gabriel studied her, admiration flickering in his eyes. You're willing to sacrifice fortune for principle. That's rare. Isabella met his gaze without hesitation. Principle is the only fortune worth keeping. The revelation shook the foundations of London's elite. Word leaked that Isabella Sterling now controlled not only Whitmore Pharmaceuticals, but also the hidden intellectual treasure of Beatrice Whitmore. Reporters camped outside her penthouse. Investors speculated wildly, and rival corporations began circling like sharks. Some called her reckless, others called her revolutionary. That night, Isabella sat alone in the vault reading Beatrice's final journal. One line stood out, written in delicate script. If they bury my work, it will be up to the next generation to dig it out. My granddaughter-in-law, whoever she may be, must carry the torch when my sons fail. Tears burned in Isabella's eyes, but her resolve hardened. Beatrice had foreseen this moment. She had left her a map, and Isabella would follow, no matter the cost. As dawn broke, Isabella stepped out of the vault with journals in her arms, her voice steady. We start tomorrow. We publish every formula. We give the world what they tried to steal. Gabriel looked at her with something deeper than respect. You're not just avenging yourself. You're rewriting history. And for the first time, Isabella realized that revenge had given way to something far greater: legacy. The press conference was held in the grand atrium of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals, a space that had once echoed with the boasts of men promising profits. Now, under Isabella Sterling's leadership, it was transformed into a stage for truth. Dozens of reporters filled the room, cameras flashing, investors watching nervously from the upper gallery. Behind Isabella stood Claire and Gabriel, silent, pillars of support. Isabella stepped up to the podium wearing a navy suit that radiated authority. The murmurs faded as she placed Beatrice Whitmore's journals on the lectern, her hand resting on them as though grounding herself in her grandmother-in-law's legacy. Her voice was calm, steady, but carried the weight of revolution. For decades, this company has operated under secrecy and greed. Lives have been lost, cures buried, futures stolen, all in the pursuit of profit. That era ends today. These journals contain formulas my grandmother-in-law, Beatrice Whitmore, created nearly a century ago. Cures for diabetes, infections, and preventable diseases that were deliberately hidden because they threatened profit margins. Effective immediately, I'm releasing these formulas into the public domain. No patents, no ownership. Humanity owns them now. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, frantic scribbles of pens, flashes of cameras exploding like fireworks. Investors in the gallery rose to their feet, outraged. One shouted, "You're destroying billions in assets." Another roared, "This is suicide. You'll bankrupt us all." Isabella didn't flinch. She lifted her chin, her eyes like sharpened glass. We may lose billions, we may collapse entirely. But if we save lives, if a child in Nigeria or a mother in India can receive affordable medicine because of this decision, then we are no longer an empire built on greed. We are an institution of healing. And that is worth more than every pound. In this building, chaos followed. 7 board members stormed out in protest. Stock prices plummeted in real time. Financial networks cutting live to panicked analysts predicting ruin. Yet among the chaos, a different sound broke through. Applause. Dr. Eleanor Park, the lone female board member who had endured decades of corruption, stood and clapped slowly, her voice carrying across the atrium. "At last," she said. "At last, this company is what it should have always been." Others hesitated, then joined her. Within minutes, half the room applauded, while the other half screamed in fury. That evening, Isabella's face dominated. Every screen across Europe. Sterling destroys patents, gives away cures. Some called her a saint, others called her a fool. Wall Street panicked, London investors howled, but humanitarian groups celebrated. Non-profits reached out within hours, offering partnerships. Doctors Without Borders praised her as a visionary. The World Health Organization requested meetings. At her penthouse, Isabella watched the news coverage. Claire poured a glass of wine. her voice wry. Well, you've officially broken capitalism. How does it feel? Isabella smiled faintly, like breathing clean air after years of choking on smoke. Gabriel stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the city skyline. You realize, he said quietly, that what you've done will make you enemies powerful enough to crush nations. Pharmaceutical giants won't forgive this. Governments will panic. You've declared war on an entire industry. Isabella turned to him, her eyes unwavering. Then let them come. I've already survived betrayal, humiliation, and war in my own home. I won't stop now. I don't need their forgiveness, I need their fear. News outlets speculated endlessly. Was Isabella Sterling reckless? Or was she the future of medicine? Shares tumbled, but something extraordinary happened. Ordinary people rallied. Thousands of letters and emails poured into the company, thanking her. Mothers from developing countries, fathers who couldn't afford insulin, children who survived on expired medication. They wrote to say thank you, to call her a savior. In the midst of it all, Gabriel approached Isabella one evening as she reviewed Beatrice's notes. His voice was softer than usual, touched with something personal. You've turned pain into purpose, Isabella. That's rarer than gold, but you can't fight the world alone. She looked up, meeting his gaze. I'm not alone. I have you, and Claire, and every child who deserves better than what Adrian and his kind offered. That's an army no corporation can match. For the first time, Gabriel allowed himself a faint smile. Then let's give them a war worth remembering. And with that, Isabella knew the tide had shifted. She was no longer just avenging betrayal. She was leading a revolution. Paris had once been Damien Whitmore's playground. Private clubs, champagne-soaked penthouses, women on his arm, and money that seemed endless. But by now, the city had turned hostile. His accounts were frozen, his apartment seized, and his allies vanished the moment Interpol issued a warrant. He still moved with arrogance, but beneath it was desperation. Sophie was gone, her child placed under state protection after she collapsed, under charges she couldn't fight. Damien had no mistress, no fortune, and soon no freedom. Interpol tracked him to a luxury hotel on Avenue Montaigne. He had been trying to broker one last deal, selling stolen patents to a foreign conglomerate. When the agents burst in, Damien was standing on the balcony, whiskey in one hand, phone in the other, bargaining for a future that no longer existed. You don't understand, he shouted as they closed in. I'm a Whitmore. I have leverage. I can still... The words died as steel cuffs snapped around his wrists. Cameras captured every moment. By nightfall, footage of his arrest spread across Europe, headlines declaring Second Whitmore Son Falls, Dynasty in Ruins. In London, Isabella watched the broadcast with steady eyes. Claire leaned against the desk, whispering, That's both brothers gone, it's over. But Isabella shook her head. It's never over. They were symptoms of a disease, not the disease itself. Gabriel studied her profile, admiration flickering. Still, one by one, you've dismantled them. Adrian in prison, Damien arrested, Margaret stripped of power. You've rewritten the Whitmore name. The trial was brutal. Prosecutors unveiled Damien's trail of corruption, offshore laundering, securities fraud, manipulation of shareholders, and evidence of human trafficking tied to one of his shell companies. Witnesses testified, bank records piled up, and every move he had made was exposed. Damien, once smug and untouchable, sat hollow-eyed in the dock. His arrogance eroded day by day as the walls closed in. Isabella did not testify. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than any words she could offer. But she attended, the hearings, sitting quietly in the gallery, her presence a reminder of every betrayal, every humiliation, every truth finally dragged into the light. Damien looked for her once, his eyes wild, searching for mercy. She gave him none. When the sentence was finally read, the courtroom fell silent. Damien Whitmore, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in prison for fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Damien's face collapsed. His bravado gone, replaced by the raw fear of a man who had built his life on privilege and discovered it had expired. Reporters swarmed Isabella as she left the courthouse. "Mrs. Sterling, how does it feel to see both Whitmore sons behind bars? Do you consider this justice? Do you feel vindicated?" She paused at the steps, her posture regal, her voice calm but resolute. This was never about vengeance. This was about truth, and truth, once revealed, cannot be buried again. The Whitmore name is finished. What comes next is rebuilding, not revenge. That night, Isabella returned to the vault, opening Beatrice's journals once more, alone in the quiet. She traced the lines of handwriting that spoke of hope and healing. For the first time, she allowed herself to exhale. Adrian was gone. Damien was gone. The empire of corruption was shattered, yet she knew the war was not over. Corporate titans across the world were aligning against her, furious at the patents she had destroyed, terrified by the revolution she had ignited, and in the shadows threats were already forming. But as she closed the journal, Isabella's reflection in the glass case was steady, unafraid. She had survived betrayal. She had survived humiliation. And now she had survived the Whitmores themselves. She whispered into the silence, her words a promise to Beatrice and to herself. Legacy is not what we inherit. It's what we choose to create. And with Damien's sentencing, Isabella's battlefield shifted from family vengeance to a war against an entire industry. Months had passed since the collapse of the Whitmore dynasty, and London had begun to whisper a new name, not Whitmore, but Sterling. The skyscraper that once bore the Whitmore Pharmaceuticals crest now displayed a new symbol, a silver rose, Beatrice's emblem, chosen by Isabella as a promise that strength and compassion could coexist. Inside the headquarters, the atmosphere had transformed. Gone were the dark suits whispering about margins. In their place were young scientists, humanitarian leaders, and doctors from around the world working side by side. The boardroom that once staged corruption now hosted strategy sessions about vaccine distribution in Africa, affordable insulin in Asia, and antibiotic programs in South America. Isabella sat at the head of the table, no longer as a wife fighting for dignity, but as a leader shaping a new era. Claire, her closest ally, managed global finances with surgical precision, ensuring no cent could vanish into offshore shadows again. Gabriel oversaw international partnerships, his once private grief now channeled into purpose. At the first annual conference under Isabella's leadership, she stood before an audience of world leaders, scientists, and journalists. Her voice carried steady, every word resonating with conviction. For too long, medicine has been chained by greed. We buried cures to preserve profits. We sacrificed lives to protect shareholders. That time is over. Today, Whitmore Pharmaceuticals becomes the Sterling Foundation for Global Health. Our mission is simple. Medicine belongs to humanity, and we will give it back. The applause shook the hall, thunderous and genuine. Cameras flashed, capturing her as a figure not of scandal, but of revolution. Headlines the next morning declared, "From betrayal to bravery, Isabella Sterling redefines an industry." But her work didn't end at speeches. Weeks later, Isabella stood in Nigeria, watching as doctors distributed safe vaccines her foundation had funded. Mothers held their children, close fathers bowed in gratitude, and Isabella felt something deeper than triumph. "Peace," she whispered softly. "This is for you, Beatrice, and for every child who never had the chance." Back in London, her parents watched proudly as their daughter's name replaced the one that had humiliated her. "You did what none of us imagined," Malcolm said, his voice thick with emotion. Vivian smiled through tears. "You didn't just survive, you transformed." Gabriel approached her one evening as she reviewed the Foundation's next projects. His voice was quiet, sincere. "You've built something unstoppable, Isabella. You've turned ashes into fire. But now you must ask yourself, what will you burn next?" She closed the journal she had been reading, her grandmother-in-law's words etched permanently in her heart. "Not burn, Gabriel. Build. Enough empires have burned. It's time for one built to last. The city lights reflected in her eyes as she looked out across London, no longer a woman defined by betrayal, but a leader defined by choice. The mistress was forgotten, the brothers imprisoned, the scandals reduced to footnotes. What remained was Isabella's legacy, one of courage, truth, and revolution. And as the night stretched over the city, she whispered the vow that had carried her through every storm. Revenge ends, legacy begins. Legacy,